because of what they found in your past. You're now on a very interesting list. The truth does not knock politely on the door of human illusion. Sometimes it kicks the door completely off its hinges, shatters the stained glass windows of our most comfortable delusions, and sets fire to the fragile houses we build out of lies just to keep ourselves warm. Most people wandering blindly through this world do not inherently hate intelligence, nor do they despise genuine spiritual light. What they truly hate is what your undeniable intelligence makes them feel about their own chosen, deeply comfortable ignorance. They despise the harsh, undeniable shadows that your authentic light casts upon the unexamined corners of their heavily curated lives. Welcome, chosen ones. If you are listening to these words, you are likely standing in the exact center of a deeply confusing, incredibly heavy, and often brutally misunderstood season of spiritual and psychological warfare. You are currently navigating a profound spiritual awakening, an era of intense, unrelenting personal growth, and inevitably a season of profound, deafening isolation. You are looking around your environment and realizing that the people you once trusted, the peers you once walked closely beside, or the social circles you once comfortably occupied have suddenly mutated into something toxic, painfully insecure, and highly performative. You are sitting there, quietly minding your own business, simply doing the agonizing internal work, while watching individuals you once respected slowly expose their true, unhealed nature. You are watching them melt down over your quiet success, frantically trying to mimic your unique energy or desperately attempting to drag you into silent, invisible, one-sided competitions that you never even signed up for. Understand this fundamental reality. What you are currently experiencing is not a random glitch in the fabric of your life. It is deeply calculated by the frantic algorithms of their own subconscious fears. They are operating from a place of severe spiritual deficit, and your overflowing internal alignment is actively triggering every single insecurity they have spent years sweeping under the psychological rug. They are behaving like panicked, under-rehearsed actors who just realized someone in the audience holds the original script and can see every missed line. Let us break down exactly why their masks are slipping, why they are losing their minds watching your quiet ascent, and the precise psychological mechanisms driving their frantic behavior. Before we dive completely into the deep end of this psychological breakdown, I need you to do something. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, drop a comment with what point hit you hardest, and share this video with someone who needs the reminder. Let's get into it. Number 1, they anchored their fragile ego to a version of you that no longer exists, and your evolution feels like a personal betrayal to their manufactured identity. When you first encountered these individuals, or when you were deeply embedded in their toxic ecosystems, you were likely operating from a place of trauma, survival, or unhealed codependency. You were a lesser version of yourself, not by nature, but by circumstance. These highly performative individuals looked at your struggles and secretly anchored their own self-worth to your perceived inferiority. As long as you were struggling, they felt successful. As long as you were confused, they felt certain. Their entire psychological framework relied on you staying in the exact, suffocating box they placed you in. But then, you did the one thing they never anticipated. You evolved. You went into the dark. You did the heavy, unglamorous internal work, and you realigned your spirit. Now you stand before them, operating from a place of authentic, hard-earned internal alignment. You are no longer easily triggered. You no longer seek their validation, and you no longer play your assigned role in their theater of dysfunction. Contrast your grounded, undeniable reality with their borrowed, externally validated facade. They are functioning entirely on a script that requires your subjugation, whereas you are functioning on pure intuition and sovereign spiritual truth. Psychologically, your growth induces massive cognitive dissonance in their minds. They are terrified of stagnation, yet they absolutely refuse to do the grueling work required to grow. So they rely entirely on comparing themselves to a stagnant version of you. Watching you outgrow them strips them of their false superiority. It is the psychological equivalent of trying to confidently navigate a highly advanced, newly built, glowing metropolis using a crumpled, inaccurate map drawn 10 years ago. They are walking into walls, falling into ditches, and growing increasingly frantic because the landscape of your energy has completely transformed. From the outside, their behavior looks incredibly goofy and deeply tragic. They are aggressively arguing with a ghost. They are trying to trigger a version of you that died several seasons ago, and when you do not react, their nervous system goes into absolute shock. They see the calm you radiate, but they refuse to acknowledge the immense resilience that forged it. They see the confidence, but they dismiss the agonizing internal battles you fought to attain it. Your evolution is the ultimate mirror of their own cowardice. Number 2. Your utter silence and absolute refusal to engage completely starves their relentless need for external performance. We live in a society that is deeply, pathetically addicted to noise, reaction, and dramatic entanglement. The toxic, insecure individuals who are desperately trying to mimic or bring you down are entirely fueled by an external currency known as narcissistic supply. They do not possess the internal architecture required to regulate their own emotions, so they must outsource their emotional regulation by provoking a reaction out of you. They throw out a subtle insult, a passive-aggressive comment, or a blatant attempt at sabotage, fully expecting you to snap, defend yourself, or step into the chaotic, low-vibrational arena with them. Instead, you offer them nothing but deafening, unbothered, absolute silence. Contrast your profound, fortress-like internal peace with their chaotic, desperate need for an audience. You are resting entirely in your alignment, knowing exactly who you are, while they are frantically dancing for the approval of a crowd that does not even genuinely care about them. Psychologically, when a highly performative person is denied a reaction, they experience what is clinically known as an ego injury. Their entire sense of self is violently tied to their ability to manipulate the environment around them. When you refuse to be manipulated, you effectively erase their sense of power. It is terrifying for them. They fear losing control of the narrative above all else, and your silence is the one narrative they absolutely cannot spin. Think of their behavior through this highly descriptive metaphor. They are like a desperate, sweating actor standing under a harsh spotlight on a dusty stage, screaming their highly rehearsed, dramatic lines into a pitch-black, entirely empty auditorium. They are putting on the performance of a lifetime, sweating, crying, throwing themselves against the floor, and the only response they receive is the quiet, indifferent echoing of their own frantic voice. It looks incredibly pathetic and deeply goofy. From an elevated perspective, they escalate their behavior, trying larger and more absurd tactics to get your attention, not realizing that every single frantic move they make only confirms to you how deeply dysregulated and powerless they truly are. Your silence is not just an absence of words. It is an active, heavy, suffocating blanket thrown over their fiery need for validation. You're outgrowing the frequency they operate on, and your silence forces them to choke on the very poison they tried to feed you. Number 3, they deeply resent the internal architecture that you have built because they know it is the one thing they can never plagiarize, fake, or purchase. In the modern era of superficiality, almost everything can be fabricated. You can fake a luxurious lifestyle, you can buy digital followers, you can memorize spiritual buzzwords, and you can rent the aesthetics of success. The individuals secretly competing with you have built their entire lives on this exact hollow premise. They are master illusionists of the counterfeit. They observe what is popular, what sounds enlightened, or what appears successful, and they hastily glue it to their own empty identity. But when they look at you, they encounter a terrifying, unsolvable anomaly. You possess a deeply rooted internal architecture, a solid framework of self-awareness, unshakable integrity, and divine spiritual alignment that was forged in the agonizing fires of isolation and profound adversity. You did not buy your peace, you bled for it. You did not memorize a script about healing. You walked through the valley of the shadow of death and actually did the excruciating work to heal. Contrast your unshakable, authentic foundation with their flimsy, borrowed, insecure facade. Psychologically, the imitator is completely consumed by a toxic mixture of envy and inadequacy. They desperately want the result without ever enduring the process. They want the heavy crown without ever carrying the cross. Their ego is incredibly fragile because they subconsciously know that their entire identity is a collage of stolen traits. They live in constant fear of stagnation, yet they refuse to do the genuine internal labor required to actually ascend. Metaphorically, they are desperately trying to stack flimsy playing cards on a highly windy table, praying the illusion holds together just long enough for someone to applaud. Meanwhile, you are quietly, methodically stacking heavy, solid bricks on deeply compacted ground. You are building a permanent fortress, and they are building a highly flammable movie set. Or, to put it another way, they are acting like someone walking around dripping in expensive, flashy jewelry that they absolutely cannot afford and bought on massive credit. They look shiny, but their spiritual bank account is heavily overdrawn. They resent you because just standing next to your solid, unshakable reality makes their artificial nature painfully obvious. It looks tragic when they attempt to mimic your depth. They see the strength, but not the breaking points that built it. Your genuine architecture forcefully exposes their structural flaws, and rather than doing the hard work to rebuild themselves, they throw stones at your windows, hoping to crack the glass and prove that you are just as broken as they are. Number 4, you force them to subconsciously confront the massive, crushing spiritual debt they have willingly accumulated throughout their lives. Every single time an individual chooses comfort over authenticity, every time they betray their own moral compass to fit into a toxic group, and every time they silence their own intuition to gain the fleeting approval of the crowd, they take out a high-interest loan on their soul. The highly performative people trying to drag you down have spent years, perhaps decades, accumulating this exact kind of spiritual debt. They have smiled when they desperately wanted to scream. They have agreed with abusers just to stay in the inner circle, and they have sold out their own unique potential just to sit at a table full of deeply miserable people. Then you walk into the room. You the chosen one, who absolutely refused to conform. You, who chose the agonizing path of walking alone rather than compromising your spirit. Contrast your uncompromising, raw, hard-earned internal alignment with their highly compromised, spiritually bankrupt, externally validated existence. Psychologically, your very existence is a walking, breathing indictment of their life choices. They are completely overwhelmed by the buried guilt of their own self-betrayal. Watching you thrive, watching you glow, and watching you succeed on your own terms completely destroys the lie they have told themselves to survive. They told themselves that selling out was necessary. They convinced themselves that everyone wears a mask, that everyone compromises, and that absolute authenticity is a childish myth. But there you are, living proof that they were entirely wrong. There you are, entirely whole, completely sovereign, and deeply aligned. The metaphor here is stark and undeniable. They have mortgaged their soul at an agonizingly high interest rate to buy a decaying house in a neighborhood they actively hate, simply because they thought it would make them look important to strangers. You, on the other hand, built a modest, beautiful, unshakable cabin in the woods with your bare hands, and you own it outright. They are drowning in the invisible payments of their compromised integrity, while you are sleeping peacefully with zero spiritual debt. Their frantic meltdown over your success is not actually about you at all. It is a violent, outward projection of their own internal grief over the parts of themselves they willingly murdered just to fit in. They see the freedom you enjoy, but they deliberately ignore the exile that paid for it. They are trapped in a prison of their own making, and they despise you simply because you have the key. Number 5. Their frantic, almost obsessive mimicry of your energy and ideas is a loud, incredibly tragic confession of their own core emptiness. One of the most bizarre, jarring, and disturbing phenomena a chosen one will experience is the copycat dynamic. You will inevitably notice that the very people who actively try to dismiss you, mock you, or secretly bring you down are simultaneously studying you with the intensity of an obsessed scholar. Suddenly, they are using your specific vocabulary. They are adopting your unique mannerisms. They are trying to recreate your creative projects, replicate your aesthetic, and forcefully insert themselves into the exact same spaces you organically navigate. Contrast your deep, overflowing well of original thought and inspiration with their shallow, stagnant, completely barren internal landscape. Your movement is generated organically from the inside out. Their movement is desperately scraped from the outside in. Psychologically, this occurs because these individuals suffer from a severe lack of a core self. They suffer from profound identity diffusion because they have spent their lives conforming and performing on a script. They never actually developed a solid ego or a genuine personality. When they encounter your blinding, undeniable authenticity, they mistake your energy for a commodity that can simply be downloaded and applied. They are terrified of their own internal void, their terrifying loss of control over who they are. So they attempt to fill that void by consuming and mirroring you. Think of the metaphor of a parasite desperately attempting to rewrite its own structural DNA to perfectly match the host it is feeding off of, hoping to disguise itself as a vital organ rather than a leech. Or imagine a completely hollow, empty shell of a human being trying to aggressively echo someone else's beautiful, complex song. It looks profoundly goofy, frantic, and uncomfortable from the outside because everyone with any sense of discernment can see the costume. Everyone can see the ill-fitting clothes of a stolen personality. They are trying to wear your heavy armor, but they lack the dense, muscular, spiritual strength required to walk in it. So they just look clumsy, weighed down, and entirely out of place. They mimic you because they want the respect you naturally command, completely failing to understand that the respect is a byproduct of the alignment they continually refuse to cultivate. They see the magnetism, but not the grueling purification that sparked it. Their entire existence is a tragic echo of your original voice, and deep down, they know they will never possess the soul required to deliver the lines with conviction. Number 6. They severely miscalculated their entire strategy because they mistakenly interpreted your quiet humility as a terminal lack of capacity. Chosen ones often walk through life with a very specific, grounded demeanor because you have battled literal demons, survived the darkest nights of the soul, and faced the absolute worst of human nature. You do not feel the need to walk into a room and loudly announce your power. You do not pound your chest. You are deeply polite, inherently graceful, and highly observant. The insecure, highly performative individuals around you viewed this quiet grace through the deeply distorted lens of their own predatory worldview. In their toxic ecosystems, kindness is always a transaction, and humility is only ever displayed by the weak. They genuinely believed that because you were quiet, you were blind. They believed that because you were polite, you were defenseless. They thought you were a soft target, an easy stepping stone for their own ego advancement and performative facade. Contrast your chosen, highly disciplined restraint with their forced, fragile weakness. You are peaceful because you choose to be. They are loud because they have to be. Psychologically, they operate on a rigid, primitive hierarchy of dominance and submission. They test boundaries constantly, poking and prodding to see what they can get away with. When you initially gave them grace, their fragile ego interpreted it as submission. But the moment you finally enforced a boundary, the moment you effortlessly blocked their manipulation and stood firmly in your authentic alignment, their entire reality shattered. They experienced a profound loss of control and an immediate, spiking terror. Metaphorically, they are the foolish individual who confidently walks into a dimly lit room, sees a massive, battle-scarred, sleeping lion resting on the floor, and genuinely convinces themselves that it is just a decorative, harmless throw rug. They wipe their muddy boots on it. They step all over it, completely arrogant in their delusion. But the absolute, paralyzing panic that washes over them the second that rug slowly opens its glowing eyes, stands up, and effortlessly displays its teeth is what you are witnessing now. Their frantic meltdown is the panicked realization that you always had the capacity to completely destroy their narrative. You just simply preferred peace. Now they are terrified of the beast they foolishly chose to awaken. They see the teeth, but not the immense discipline that keeps them sheathed. They played a highly dangerous performative game, and they are now horrified to learn you not only wrote the rules, but you also have the power to flip the board at any moment. Number 7. Your very presence forcefully exposes their desperate, lifelong reliance on artificial, societal scripts. The vast majority of people do not actually live a sovereign life. They simply execute a highly predictable, pre-approved program. They follow the script handed to them by their toxic family, their corrupted industry, or their superficial social circles. They derive their entire sense of safety from knowing exactly what line to say next, exactly what brand to wear, exactly who to hate, and exactly who to praise. They are institutionalized by the matrix of human ego. Then they encounter you. A chosen one does not operate on scripts. You operate on an unshakable, direct connection to spiritual truth and authentic internal alignment. You do not care about the unspoken rules of their toxic hierarchies. You will happily walk away from a table they would kill to sit at. You will easily discard a title they would sell their soul to acquire. Contrast your fluid, sovereign, deeply autonomous movement through life with their rigid, terrified, highly conditioned adherence to societal expectations and externally validated facades. Psychologically, your freedom is viscerally terrifying to them. It triggers their deepest anxieties about survival and their immense fear of stagnation. They have convinced themselves that the only way to survive in this world is to play the corrupt game. When they see you surviving, and not just surviving but thriving, completely outside of the game, it invalidates all of their agonizing compromises. It makes them realize that their cage has always been unlocked, and they are simply too cowardly to push the door open. Metaphorically, they are playing a heavily programmed, incredibly boring video game that is strictly on rails. They can only move left or right within the narrow confines the developers allowed. You, conversely, have completely broken out of the code and are running freely through an infinite, hyper-realistic, open-world landscape where gravity bends to your will and the horizon is limitless. They watch your screen, see your boundless freedom, and instead of asking how to break out of their own game, they aggressively try to pull the plug on your console. They cannot handle the sheer altitude of your freedom, so they try to enforce their pathetic, grounded rules upon your soaring reality. They see the flight, but not the leap of faith that initiated it. Their frantic behavior is the tantrum of a prisoner furious at a bird for flying through the bars. You prove that the script is a lie, and for people who have invested their entire lives in that lie, your authentic existence is an unforgivable offense. Number 8. They are currently locked in a perpetual, agonizing state of panic because they can no longer predict, analyze, or manipulate your next move. Toxic, highly performative people are obsessed with control. They are psychological accountants, constantly keeping a ledger of people's weaknesses, triggers, and predictable patterns. They know that if they push a specific button, they will get a highly predictable emotional reaction. This is how they navigate relationships, not through genuine connection, but through calculated, cold manipulation. In the past, they might have had a read on you. They might have known how to make you feel guilty, how to make you over-explain yourself, or how to provoke your deep empathy. But the chosen one goes through a radical internal restructuring. You did the grueling shadow work. You healed the specific bleeding wounds they used to exploit. Now, you stand in authentic, hard-earned internal alignment as a completely unreadable, unpredictable force of nature. Contrast your fluid, intuition-led, deeply grounded present state with their hyper-vigilant, control freak, deeply paranoid and insecure facade. Psychologically, the loss of predictive control over a target induces severe, crippling anxiety in a manipulator. When they can no longer accurately guess your emotional response, they feel instantly vulnerable and entirely exposed. Their fragile ego relies on always being 3 steps ahead. But how do you stay ahead of someone who is no longer walking on the same path? The metaphor for this dynamic is brilliantly simple and devastatingly accurate. They are sitting at a table, sweating profusely, trying to execute a highly calculated, rigid game of standard checkers. They are sliding their little plastic pieces, trying to trap you in a corner. You, however, have quietly flipped the entire board over, changed the rules entirely, and started playing a complex game of three-dimensional chess in a completely different language that they do not even speak. They are staring at you in absolute horror as your pieces move in directions they didn't even know existed. They try to provoke you, and you respond with joy. They try to isolate you, and you use the solitude to build an empire. They try to smear your name, and you use the free publicity to expand your reach. Every single manipulative algorithm they try to run on you returns a fatal error, and their entire operating system is crashing in real time. They see the unbothered victory, but not the hundreds of silent defeats you endured to learn how to win. Their panic is palpable because they realize they are desperately trying to turn the pages of a book you have already finished writing. Number 9. The glaring, profoundly uncomfortable contrast between your steady, silent climb and their desperate, deafeningly loud hustle is driving them absolutely insane. We are currently living in an era that worships the illusion of motion over actual, tangible progress. The people competing with you are deeply infected by this modern sickness. They are constantly grinding for clout, frantically networking with people they secretly despise, and loudly broadcasting every minor, insignificant achievement to ensure the audience is still watching. Their entire existence is a frantic, exhausting hustle for external validation and a deeply performative facade. You, as a chosen one, represent the exact opposite frequency. You are engaged in a steady, deliberate, intensely private climb. You do not need the applause of the crowd to confirm that you are moving upward. You do not need to post your healing, broadcast your spiritual revelations, or prove your financial stability to people who do not genuinely care about you. Contrast your deep, internal alignment and undeniable substance with their constant need for hype, masks, and fleeting virality. Psychologically, they are terrified of the dark, quiet spaces where real growth actually occurs. They equate silence with death, and stillness with absolute failure. They fear stagnation so intensely that they fake momentum. When they see you happily operating in the shadows, quietly building an unshakable foundation without needing to beg for attention, it completely shatters their worldview. The metaphor here is undeniable. They are out in the shallow soil, frantically planting cheap, fast-growing, superficial weeds. These weeds sprout overnight, look incredibly green for exactly 1 week, and then are instantly blown away by the first mild breeze of adversity. You, however, have spent years in the dark, unglamorous heavy dirt, slowly and meticulously growing the deep, massive, completely immovable roots of an ancient oak tree. For a long time, it looked like you were doing nothing while they were flourishing. But now, your massive trunk is breaking through the surface. Your branches are expanding to block out their artificial light, and they realize with absolute dread that no storm, no wind, and no amount of pulling will ever be able to uproot what you have built. Your permanent substance makes their temporary hustle look utterly ridiculous and deeply tragic. They see the branches, but not the roots. They are loud because they are empty. You are quiet because you are full. The contrast between your steady momentum and their noisy stagnation is a daily reminder that true power never has to shout to be heard. 10. Because of what they found in your past, you're now on a very interesting list. This is perhaps the most heavily guarded, intensely terrifying psychological secret of the people who are frantically trying to bring you down. When they first noticed your rise, their immediate, cowardly instinct was not to support you, but to investigate you. Toxic, performative individuals never confront power directly. They look for the back door. They went digging. They scoured your history, asked around about your previous seasons, and aggressively searched for dirt, failure, or a debilitating weakness that they could hold over your head forever. They were desperately hoping to find a sanitized, privileged, completely untested history that they could easily dismantle, or a massive, shameful failure that would allow them to permanently cancel your ascent. But instead of finding fragile skeletons in your closet, they stumbled into a terrifying reality. They found your authentic, hard-earned survival record. They discovered the immense, brutal, unspeakable things that you have endured, walked through and absolutely conquered to achieve your internal alignment. They saw the fires you survived without even smelling like smoke. Contrast their heavily manicured, deeply sheltered, or completely unhealed emotional history with your gritty, battle-scarred, undeniably authentic resilience. Psychologically, this discovery completely alters their threat assessment of you. They went looking for a weakness and accidentally found out that you are virtually unkillable. Their fragile ego and reliance on a script of manipulation completely short-circuits. They realize that you have already survived worse things than they could ever possibly do to you. Now you are no longer just an annoyance or a minor competitor. You have been placed on a very interesting list in their minds. You are on the short list of people they genuinely fear. You are on the list of uncontrollable, highly dangerous spiritual anomalies. The metaphor is profound. They thought they were sneaking into your house to open a dusty, forgotten closet, hoping to find a few fragile skeletons they could mock and parade around. Instead, they forced open the heavy iron doors of a reinforced armory and found hundreds of polished, sharpened weapons that you personally forged in the darkest chapters of your life. They backed away slowly, deeply terrified, realizing that the very past they thought would destroy you is the exact reason you are completely untouchable. They see the weapons but not the wounds that necessitated them. They went looking for a victim and found a warrior entirely out of their league, leaving them looking frantic and incredibly goofy as they realized they brought a butter knife to a spiritual gunfight. Number 11. They live in absolute, paralyzing terror that the wider audience will eventually wake up and notice the glaring difference between the real and the counterfeit. The individuals mimicking you and secretly competing with you do not operate in a vacuum. They are highly dependent on the flying monkeys, the enablers, and the blind audience that currently claps for their performance. Their entire social standing, their reputation, and their incredibly fragile egos rely entirely on the collective illusion that they are the genuine article. They have positioned themselves as the experts, the enlightened ones, or the dominant forces in their circles, using a carefully curated, insecure facade. But your continued, undeniable presence acts as a highly disruptive frequency to their broadcast. As you continue to rise naturally, shining with authentic internal alignment, the contrast becomes sharper and more undeniable every single day. Contrast your inherent, undeniable spiritual value with their perceived, highly manipulated, deeply artificial value. Psychologically, these individuals are plagued by a severe, deeply entrenched form of imposter syndrome, which they aggressively try to mask as supreme arrogance. They know, in the quiet, terrifying hours of the night, that they are frauds. They fear the loss of control over their audience. The terror of being unmasked in front of their own loyal enablers keeps them awake in a cold sweat. They know that truth has a resonant frequency that cannot be faked, and they can hear your frequency getting louder and clearer. Metaphorically, they are a highly convincing, carefully printed counterfeit $100 bill that has managed to smoothly fool the naive cashier for years, but your completely unapologetic existence is the absolute equivalent of that counterfeit bill being slowly, inevitably pushed underneath the harsh purple glow of an ultraviolet scanner. They are sitting there, sweating uncontrollably, staring at the machine, knowing with absolute, terrifying certainty that it is only a matter of time before the machine beeps, the fake ink is revealed, and everyone in the room turns to look at them with profound disgust. They are desperately trying to destroy you because you are the scanner. You do not even have to say a single word. Your mere authentic presence is enough to expose the glaring lack of a spiritual watermark on their deeply compromised soul. They see the light, but not the pure electricity that powers it. They are frantic because they are racing against the clock of their own inevitable exposure, knowing that your authentic alignment will eventually eradicate their borrowed shadows entirely. Number 12. You have officially become the inescapable mirror that they have spent their entire miserable lives desperately running away from. Human beings possess an incredible, almost terrifying capacity for self-deception. When an insecure, highly performative individual refuses to acknowledge their own flaws, their own toxicity, or their own unhealed trauma, they relegate those dark elements to what psychologist Carl Jung called the shadow self. To survive without facing this shadow, they must project it entirely onto other people. They accuse others of the exact crimes they are actively committing. They call others insecure while trembling with profound inadequacy. But a chosen one, someone who has integrated their light and their shadow through hard-earned internal alignment, operates as an incredibly clean, highly polished mirror. When these performative individuals interact with you, they do not actually see you. They see the horrifying reflection of their own wasted potential, their own moral cowardice, and their own deep-seated spiritual ugliness. Contrast your radical self-awareness and willingness to be wrong with their profound, impenetrable denial and constant need to be perceived as flawless. Psychologically, interacting with you induces a state of near-narcissistic collapse in the imitator. They cannot project their darkness onto you because your authentic alignment instantly deflects it straight back into their own eyes. Their fragile ego cannot handle the truth, and their reliance on a script of victimhood completely fails. Therefore, the only logical option for their terrified psyche is to try and violently shatter the mirror. The metaphor here is visceral and exact. They are completely covered in mud, dirt, and filth, but they have spent years pretending to be impeccably clean by intentionally living in a very dimly lit, murky room surrounded by blind people. Your sudden arrival in their life is the absolute equivalent of someone walking into that murky room and violently flipping on the harsh, undeniable, blindingly bright, hospital-grade, fluorescent lights. Suddenly, everyone can see the dirt. Suddenly, they can see their own filth. They are screaming, covering their eyes, and trying to smash the light bulbs, entirely failing to realize that the light did not make them dirty. It merely revealed the dirt they had been desperately trying to ignore. They see the reflection, but not the immense polishing it took to create the mirror. You are the light, and their frantic, goofy aggression is just the panic of a creature entirely unaccustomed to the truth. You force them to look at exactly what they are, and they will try to destroy you rather than change themselves. Number 13. They are slowly, agonizingly realizing that their frantic attempts to sabotage you are only serving to radically accelerate your spiritual growth. there is an incredibly profound, undeniable spiritual mechanic at play in the life of a chosen one, the law of divine alchemy. Whatever poison the enemy painstakingly creates for you, your highly evolved spiritual system naturally metabolizes into pure, high-octane fuel. When these insecure individuals orchestrate smear campaigns, when they try to turn your peers against you, or when they attempt to steal your opportunities, they genuinely believe they are inflicting permanent, devastating damage. They are executing their performative script perfectly, expecting you to wither, collapse, and completely surrender. But instead, you do something that deeply terrifies them. You alchemize the resistance. You use the isolation they forced upon you to build an unbreakable relationship with the divine and solidify your internal alignment. You use the betrayal to relentlessly refine your discernment. You use the closed doors to pivot toward massive, unprecedented blessings. Contrast your supernatural, authentic alchemy with their toxic, self-destructive, and entirely performative poison. Psychologically, nothing frustrates a manipulator more than watching their carefully laid traps act as a literal catapult for their target. It completely destroys their illusion of power, spikes their fear of stagnation, and forces them to witness a divine protection they cannot comprehend, let alone breach. They are exhausted because fighting you is like fighting gravity. The harder they push, the more exhausted they become, while you remain entirely unbothered. The metaphor is ancient but perfectly accurate. They thought they were standing over your open grave, aggressively shoveling heavy, suffocating, dark dirt onto your body. They patted the dirt down, wiped the sweat from their brow, and gleefully celebrated your permanent burial. What they entirely failed to comprehend is that you were never a corpse. You were always a deeply potent, divine seed. The dirt they threw on you was the exact environment you needed to germinate. The heavy darkness they subjected you to was the exact pressure required to break your shell. Now they are forced to watch in utter frantic horror as you explode through the soil, growing rapidly toward the sunlight, utilizing their own hatred as the very fertilizer for your magnificent, undeniable, and permanent bloom. They see the blossom, but not the burying. Their sabotage is your stepping stone, and their frantic realization that they are inadvertently funding your expansion is a deeply tragic psychological defeat. Number 14. The ultimate psychological defeat for them is the slow, agonizing realization that they are merely a footnote in your story, while you have inadvertently become the entire climax of theirs. This is the final, crushing, inescapable blow to the fragile ego of the highly performative hater. They spend every waking moment plotting against you, thinking about you, furiously checking your social media, talking about you in their private group chats, and completely obsessing over your trajectory. In their deeply insecure minds, they are locked in a massive, epic rivalry with you. They view this as a battle of equals, but the agonizing truth, the brutal reality that slowly dawns on them in the quiet, terrifying hours of the night, is that you are not competing with them at all. You barely even register their existence. You are entirely forward-facing, obsessed with your purpose, your authentic internal alignment, and your divine calling. Contrast your expansive, forward-facing, purpose-driven vision with their obsessive, backward-looking, entirely parasitic, performative fixation. Psychologically, this is the ultimate narcissistic injury. It is the realization of their own profound insignificance in the grand, structural architecture of your life. Their fear of loss of control reaches its absolute peak. They desperately want to be your greatest enemy, but they are terrified to discover they are practically irrelevant to your journey. They rely on the script of being the main character, but your reality proves they are barely an extra. Metaphorically, they realize that in the massive, beautifully bound, multi-volume encyclopedia of your incredible life, they are going to amount to nothing more than a tiny, misspelled footnote at the bottom of a chapter you don't even bother to reread. Meanwhile, their entire book, their entire personality, and their entire focus have become completely consumed by their obsession with you. It looks profoundly tragic from the outside. They are standing barefoot on the muddy shore, aggressively screaming at the massive, powerful ocean to stop moving. They are frantically commanding the waves to bow to them, and the ocean, entirely unaware of their pathetic, goofy existence, naturally and effortlessly pulls away with the tide, leaving them completely stranded, violently shivering, and entirely alone in the shallow, muddy puddles of their own making. They see the tide, but not the moon that pulls it. They are fighting a war against a force of nature that does not even know they are there, and their ultimate tragedy is recognizing they are totally insignificant. When you zoom out and look at all of this from a much higher elevation, when you take a massive step back from the daily microaggressions, the frantic mimicry, the desperate smear campaigns, and the profoundly goofy behavior of these deeply insecure individuals, one fundamental, unshakable truth becomes absolutely impossible to ignore. This was never really about the petty details of your daily life. It was never truly about your physical actions, your specific achievements, or the mundane words you spoke. This entire dynamic is, and always has been, a massive, invisible energy war. The people who are exposing themselves, losing their minds, and melting down are not fighting your physical presence. They are fighting the overwhelming, undeniable frequency of your authentic alignment. Your very existence is a blinding mirror that forces them to look at the terrifying shadows they have spent their entire lives running away from. By simply breathing, healing, and standing firmly in your internal architecture, you completely disrupt the carefully curated illusions of everyone who relies on a fake reality to feel important. Do not allow their panic to dictate your pace. I want to leave you with this final empowering reminder. You do not need to prove absolutely anything to these people. You do not need to step onto their low vibrational stage and perform for an audience that is secretly praying for your downfall. You do not need to step out of your alignment to seek petty revenge, and you certainly do not need to explain the mechanics of your flight to people who are absolutely committed to crawling in the mud. Let them obsessively mimic the armor. They will never have the spiritual strength to swing the heavy sword. Your only job, your only true responsibility in this bizarre, heavy season, is to just keep growing. Keep standing firmly in your authenticity. Keep tending to your internal architecture, and let the undeniable gravity of your spiritual alignment do all the talking. They will exhaust themselves fighting the wind, while you simply use it to soar higher. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, drop a comment with what point hit you hardest, and share this video with someone who needs the reminder. Stay chosen, stay blessed.